The opinions expressed in this show do not necessarily reflect the views of Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Connecting with Kim here on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network. I'm your host, Kim Droege, and we're so glad you joined us today because you know we work very hard to bring you information about people, places, and organizations that make living your best life in our corner of paradise, and it really is paradise. So we're happy you joined us today. And before we get started, I would like to ask you to like and follow our Facebook, Instagram, and X accounts where you can find all the information about the show, the guests, the topic, and of course my on-air wardrobe that is courtesy of the Spring of Tampa Bay, who is providing safe spaces and empowering services for survivors of domestic violence and their children. And they've been doing a great job at it for more than 40 years. So we want you to support them at their thrift store and their boutique. And they're also opening a new location. They will be in the new location by the time this show airs up in Drew Park. So please support their mission because they provide needed services, unfortunately needed services, and they've been doing such a great job for more than 40 years. So we also want to remind you they can catch the audio of our show on Sun Radio 96.3 FM and on your favorite streaming platform Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 3:30 in the afternoon. So many ways to catch Connecting with Kim. So let me introduce my guest because I'm really thrilled to have her on. And you know me, who am I kidding? I love all my guests, right? But this is such an important topic we're going to cover today. And I'm just so glad that she could join me. So without further ado, let me introduce you to Laurie Swink, who is the co-founder and the consulting program director for Selah Freedom. And what is Selah Freedom? They are anti-human trafficking. And unfortunately, this is a subject we have to keep dealing with. But Laurie, welcome to Connecting with Kim.
Thank you, Kim, for having me.
My pleasure. So we always start the show the same way. We love our guests to share as much as they feel comfortable with about their life journey, because that usually brings us to what we're going to talk about today. So take it away.
So I will tell you, I didn't know what human trafficking was probably about 14 years ago. And I was in a church in Sarasota, and they were showing a video about trafficking. And it was about something that had happened to somebody in another country, and she was sharing about her journey. And that was my first introduction to it, because I'll be honest with you, I grew up in the Tampa Bay area. I would see people walking out there on the streets. I knew why they were out there. And I remember just driving by thinking, why don't you get a job? I've got a job, just go get a job. And then when I learned about the facts of trafficking, it changed everything for me. You know, then the questions were, wow, what happened to you that this has now become your reality? And so then the next step is, what can I do about it?
That is what brought you to found Selah Freedom.
Correct, yes.
So tell me about, because I had the pleasure of attending one of your events recently, and I already knew about your organization because I had met some people from your organization, but I learned so much that evening at the event. So I'd like you to first start with, what does Selah mean? You know, take us through that.
So Selah is a Hebrew word that means to rest, to pause, to reflect. So what we do is we provide the opportunities for these trafficking survivors to rest, to pause, to figure out how they want to go forward in life, and then we help them make that happen so that they have their own true freedom to be able to live the life they were created to live.
You had this experience which led to this epiphany of starting this organization. And I don't imagine that starting an organization is that easy. So why don't you it's complicated, right? And especially when you're dealing with such a sensitive topic that many people, I don't know if you experienced this, but many people don't really want to talk about it. I mean, they know it exists. I think Tampa, unfortunately, Florida is like is third largest market.
Correct.
Market's not even the right word, but you know what I mean, location for this kind of activity.
Right.
So tell me what happened when you decided to start Selah Freedom.
I typically say, for me, it was a God calling. It was this video that I saw, this survivor shared about what had happened to her, and then the next slide was who will give them a home. It was a black slide with white letters, and I had an experience that I hadn't had before or since then, where I literally felt a piercing in my heart, and it still brings me to tears.
Oh.
Because it went deep. It went deep in my heart, and I remember just gasping and thinking, oh God, where do they go? Where do they go? Because that's just the beginning. It's not the end.
No, right.
And somebody needs to do something about that, you know? And so that was my catalyst for jumping into it. So I will tell you, it's not because I knew what I was doing. It's not because I was the most qualified person to do it. I was probably the least qualified person to do it. But I will say, when God gives you a calling, he's not looking at a resume. He's not looking at the letters behind your name. He's not looking at your experience. All he's asking for is a yes. And then these amazing people come along to help make this happen. And that's exactly what's happened at Selah Freedom. So we've been doing this for 13 years now. And 2025 will be the beginning of our 14th year. And it's really, we have such a qualified, amazing team of staff as well as volunteers and donors that make all of this happen.
Help our audience understand the size and scope of your organization. Help them understand the infrastructure. And I think it's always good to start with the basics and then kind of go like, how does it actually work? Mm-hmm. Once we have established, because I know that you had a North Gala and you're having a South Gala down in Sarasota. Mm-hmm. And you do this every year. Mm-hmm. Help them understand that.
Right. So what we've done is we've looked at every aspect of anti-trafficking, and we've built a program around that. So our first program is our awareness program. And that is the people who go out in the community to share with people what the problem is and how they can become part of the solution. The events, the fundraising. And then we have our outreach program. So that's the staff that works directly with law enforcement, judicial system, with the judges, and they are the first point of contact for the survivors that we encounter. So they're finding them in the jails, on stings, out on the streets, in detox. Wherever they are, our team follows them until they're ready to say yes to the services. Then we have our residential program. So that's where we serve women who are 18 plus, and they come into that, and we provide wraparound services. We also provide outreach services to mentorship, because not all survivors may need a home to live in. They have a place to live, but they still need the trauma therapy, and they still need help with employment and support groups. And so we make that happen for them as well. But also it allows us to be able to serve men in outreach mentorship as well, because we don't have a house for men. So, but for the residential program, that's an opportunity for these women to come and to learn all of the things that they missed when they were growing up because of the trauma that was happened to them. Unfortunately, the average point of entry into trafficking is ages 12 to 14 years old. Mm-hmm. So you think about when somebody has encountered that, and all of the chaos that's going on in their life and the trauma that they are experiencing, they're missing out on those, how do you have a budget? How do you get a job? How do you write a resume? All of the things that they missed out on. And so we provide all of that for them in our programming. So our houses are very comfortable. Many of our survivors have explained to us that they had like a mildewy bed on the floor, or they had to sleep in the closet, or they were out on the streets. And so for them to come into a home where they have their own bedroom and their own bed, and it's a very comfortable environment. We have an art therapy room where we have volunteers who come in and they teach them all these great things to do and allow that creative part of their brain to flow naturally. And when you're operating out of that creative part of your brain, all of the chaos of the problems you're dealing with get quieted down. And so that's an important part as well.
So they are 18 and above.
Yes.
In Selah.
Exactly.
Even though they may have started on their trafficking journey in their preteen and teen years. The whole goal, I imagine, is to break the cycle.
Exactly.
To have them understand that you are not your past.
Exactly.
And you have opportunities and you are worthy. And there are things that you can do that don't involve this. You're right. When God speaks to you, you have to answer. And you have to trust
Yes.
that God
knows what he's doing.
will provide the way.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He will provide the way. What was the most, when you started this journey, what was the most surprising thing you encountered?
You know, you hit on it before, that there are people who aren't comfortable talking about it. And I thought I expected that when we would say something, people would be like, oh my goodness, that's a problem. We have to do something about this. And I expected that 100%. And it didn't happen that way. And then what I came to learn was, although you can be comfortable with information because you have shared it many times, it's an entry point for other people, you know? And so to give them that grace of being able to come back and revisit that topic, you know, when they're more comfortable. But sometimes there's also a fear. You know, if I'm thinking about it, maybe it's going to happen to my child, you know, or granddaughter or grandson. And that is a frightening thing.
Well, it is. And it could be a very realistic one, too. I mean, given today the access that preteens and youngsters and teens have to the internet.
Yes.
And parents maybe aren't paying as much attention as they need to be. And they're meeting people all over the place online. And there's a lot of people out there who are not well-intentioned.
Correct. And that's the thing. If your child has access to internet, then predators have access to your child. That's the reality. And these predators, they will, you know, it's not a quick process usually. They're very intentional in building a relationship. And if your child is 14, well, then they're 14. Doesn't matter if it's a 30-year-old man or woman.
Right.
Like they'll do this, they'll mimic it, right? And then they start building this relationship. And so that's why our prevention program is so important, because we want to get on the front end of this.
Right. You want to stop it before it starts.
Exactly. We don't want these boys and girls to end up in our mentorship program, our residential program. And so what we've done is we have created age-appropriate curriculum from kindergarten to 12th grade, where we can go into schools, Boys and Girls Club, youth groups, anywhere we're invited, and we can teach them about how to protect themselves in a very fun way. So, you know, and then we also provide training for caregivers and parents, because how do you have that conversation with your child and not give them night terrors, right? So there is a way to do that. So we offer free trainings on Zoom for parents to understand how to have these conversations with their children. But like one of the things we do in our 3rd grade curriculum is we share the difference between a secret and a surprise.
Right.
So a surprise is something that you don't tell anybody, but once everybody finds out, they're excited. A secret, if someone's telling you to keep a secret and it makes you feel bad inside, you don't have to keep that secret. And so we talk to them about identifying 3 trusted adults. Those 3 trusted adults are not in their family, though, unfortunately, because almost 50% of child abuse comes from a family member. So it may be a teacher, a guidance counselor, youth pastor, you know, somebody. And so what we teach them is if someone's telling you you have to keep a secret, or they're having a conversation with you and you're not comfortable with it, you can tell one of your trusted adults. And if this one doesn't listen, go to that one. And many times that's all a child needs to know, is that I can speak up. I have a voice and I can say something, and it's okay. And it changes everything.
Oh, that's amazing to me. So if you're just joining me now on Connecting with Kim, my guest in the chair is Laurie Swink, who is the co-founder and the consulting program director of Selah Freedom, which is an anti-human trafficking organization. So what was the biggest difference that you found between women and girls being trafficked and men? Boys and men.
Right. For the men, it's almost harder, because I know with the ones that we've dealt with, you know, they've even said there was shame because they were a man, because they were a boy, saying things like, you know, I should have been strong enough to stop it. When in reality, you've got these predators that are with these vulnerable people. You don't have a chance, you know. So I think that it's makes it harder for the males to stand up and say, yes, something like that happened to me.
As you continue this journey, how has Selah Freedom expanded what it's done? Because you start, I mean, you said I had no idea how to do this, but you did it, and I know you did. No person's an island, so I know that you did it with a lot of support of the community and other organizations, and so as you kept down your journey, kept traveling your path. What did you find?
We made our own mistakes, right? I mean, it's impossible
Everybody
not
does,
to.
right?
Yeah. So what we did was we created a consulting program so that we could help set other organizations up for success and empower and educate them with our policies and procedures, our training, with sharing with them our mistakes so they don't make the same mistakes, but then also walking through their mistakes as well, because no organization out there is going to be able to do it perfectly, right?
Right.
And so we've been able to help over 100 organizations in 20 states and 5 countries with resources like program curriculum. When we started, I looked at my background as education.
I wondered, because you didn't actually share that, so I was kind of wondering.
Yes, it was in teaching. Loved it, absolutely loved it. But I looked for curriculum that really spoke to the people that we were trying to help. And there was curriculum out there for domestic abuse or addictions, but not really for trafficking. And so we just started writing our own curriculum. And so now what we do is we've put it all in a book, in a PDF, and other organizations can purchase it and use it. And it's over a year's worth of curriculum. And I would love to have had something like that when we started. That's what we're able to provide with them: our policies, our procedures, our manuals, our curriculum, all of these things.
You're partnering with a lot of organizations and a lot of other people. Are you finding, or do you find that the school, because let's face it, are they still spending time in school? Or sometimes when they're, I guess I'm just having this thought as we're talking, as they're trafficked, are they sort of out of that part of growing up?
Some of them didn't finish high school, because of the trauma.
Right.
So we helped them get their GED. And then we also help them get into trade school. We help get them into college, whatever it is that they want to do to be able to have a self-sustaining way to take care of themselves going forward.
Because I'm just wondering if teachers, you're partnering with all these people, you have these curriculums, you're making people aware. A teacher is one of the things that you mentioned as having your circle of, or your triangle, I kind of think of it as triangle, of 3 trusted people that you can talk to. I mean, are teachers really good at recognizing the signs?
They're getting better at it because I know in the state of Florida, Governor DeSantis has made a mandate that all schools have to provide anti-trafficking training to the students, so the teachers are getting that as well. I think there's always more to learn.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. I know that we had a high school that allowed us to come in and do an after-school girls club, and we did our prevention program, and it was very well attended, and it went on for, I think it was 6 weeks. And I was able to be there for the last one, where they were able to share about what do they know now that they didn't know 6 weeks ago. And one of the girls said, well, I work in Publix after school, and there's this guy that comes in, he's probably in his 30s, and he keeps targeting my lane, and I know he does because I'll have a couple customers, and this one will be free over there, but he still comes to my lane. And he'll say things like, oh, you're so pretty. What school do you go to? How old are you? And she says, I didn't know how to answer him because I didn't want to be rude. But then the staff told me, look, he's the one being rude, not you. And it's perfectly okay to say, I'm not comfortable with those questions, and your order is $4.32. And so you think about the power of that light bulb coming on for her, and now she gets to teach her peers.
Yeah.
That same thing. Peers that we will never meet.
Yeah,
right?
that is so amazing, isn't it?
Yes.
Because, I mean, I'm sure you have had, like I've had those experiences standing in the grocery store line or the drugstore line or wherever it was, and watching someone else, and standing there thinking, that's not really, you need to move along, right?
Exactly.
We need to get this going.
Exactly.
And wanting to, I guess, like a lot of people, I show my, my displeasure with what's going on by, shifting my weight or making, but, I think we're all really maybe a little reluctant to speak up and say, you know what, that's not appropriate, and you need to move on. Because you're always like, well, are they just being friendly, or are they really being intrusive? You know, it's a fine line, I think.
It is a fine line, and I think, sometimes people ask, well, when should I report? Because I'm not sure if there was something, that really happened. And we always say it's better to be wrong and report, and then to be right and not report.
Yeah, err on the side of caution.
Exactly.
Because if your intentions are pure, people will understand that your intentions were pure. You were not trying to be a busybody. You were not trying to be a nosy. You were genuinely concerned about someone's welfare, especially someone vulnerable, a child or a young adult who, I think today, like everything in the world is evolving and getting more sophisticated. I mean, look at just scamming, right?
Yes.
So if you look at the sophistication and complexities of just scamming, right? I can't imagine that this world is even more nuanced.
Absolutely. Because, the reality, too, is that these traffickers look at a person's life as a commodity, not as something that's valuable. So they're just looking at the dollar signs.
Yeah, they're money making,
and they
right?
make millions of dollars off of these people.
How big is actually the industry in trafficking? Do you know what?
Well,
it must be
billions. It's billions worldwide. And the unfortunate thing too is that it's not just happening in one place.
No.
It's not just happening in our nation, it's happening globally. But what are we doing in our nation? And I honestly believe that the state of Florida can be the solution center to the United States in the way that we address trafficking, with the services that we provide, but also getting the prevention into the schools and helping these children to understand, and these teenagers to understand what's really happening to them when somebody has that conversation with them that they don't feel good about.
It's so funny you just said that, because I was just going to ask you, moving forward, because you've been on this journey for a while, 13
Yes.
years, and going on 14. I was going to ask you, what do you think the next steps are? What do you think needs to be done? And it's so, and I still want to ask that question. What do you see as the biggest need?
The biggest need is prevention. It is, getting on the front end of this. We have numbers as far as how many children we get to talk to, and we get to be able to bring the prevention curriculum to, but we'll never know the numbers that don't end up in our residential home,
right,
or a mentorship program, right?
Right.
Which is a blessing,
It's a blessing.
Yes,
it's a blessing.
Yes, it is. I just get super excited every time a child gets to have this training, and then they fill out a survey afterwards. And one of the boys said, "Thank you for coming, because nobody is talking to us about this."
Oh my gosh! Now that makes you have a gut clutch,
Yes.
right? Like,
Yes.
no, what do you mean nobody's talking to you about this? It's so prevalent. And these are the ages, like, 9, 10, 11, when they're starting to...
Right, he was in middle school.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
And no one's talking to us about this.
Right.
Okay, so that's something that I agree. You can work with the county, then the state of Florida, and say, we this has to be. And I'm so grateful that we have a governor that is so supportive of this.
Exactly, yes.
Because that makes a huge difference.
A big difference, yes. He's and an attorney general as well.
Yes.
And
a sheriff.
So,
We're
yes.
blessed in Hillsborough County, and I don't personally know all the other county sheriffs, but we are surrounded in this area by people, and our county sheriff, Chad Chronister, who is very sensitive and very attuned and very concerned about this particular.
Exactly. And I just did a symposium at Gannon University with one of his detectives, and he was on the force before Sheriff Chronister came around, and he said that it was not being addressed at all. And he said when Sheriff Chronister came, it changed everything. And finally, human trafficking was being not only talked about, but focused on like, what can we do about this? So yes, very grateful for his leadership.
Well, and Sheriff Chronister, Sheriff G was a great sheriff, and Chronister followed Sheriff G. But different generations look at the world differently, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So they're exposed to different things, and so what sticks out in their mind is different than the generation before them. So that's what growth and development and everything is all about, right? You got to keep rolling that over and getting fresh ideas. So I'm really happy for you about that.
That's true, because when we first started, we launched in Sarasota, and so we met with some law enforcement officers there, and I asked them the question, are you seeing trafficking here? And they said, no, we don't have any of that. We just have prostitution, we have high-end escort, and we have a strip club. And of course, all of those, foster trafficking. But to be fair, I didn't know what it was either. Like I said, I would see people walking down the street, and I'd think, why are you doing that? Do something different. Just get a job, right?
Yeah.
So once the training happened, one of the law enforcement officers came up to us and said, since this training, he said, if I would have had this before, my last 3 cases would have been written up as trafficking. But then the laws had to change, because then there were stiffer fines for drugs than there was trafficking. So then that had to change, and that has changed. So one of the last cases that involved a survivor that we served, her trafficker got a life sentence.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
That's incredible.
It was incredible.
I'm happy to hear that. Well, Laurie, I am sorry to say, but we are out of time. This is a subject that we could spend hours talking about, but I am so glad that you joined me today on Connecting with Kim to talk about this very important topic. And I know that January is Anti-Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and there'll be lots of focus, activities, and whatnot to draw more attention to this incredibly sad topic that we have to keep dealing with.
It is sad, but more of us are getting on the solution side, and that's the exciting part. We're seeing lives dramatically changed.
Well, thank you again for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
So if you're just joining us now, and I'm going to have to rush now because the timer is flashing at me. My guest today in the chair was Laurie Swink, who is the co-founder and consulting program director for Selah Freedom, which is anti-human trafficking organization here in the Tampa Bay area. So you have an opportunity. We'll provide all the links for you to go to the website, look it up, etc. So you will have more information because knowledge is power. And as I always say, if you see something, say something, because it's always better to err on the side of caution. So thank you for joining us today. Come back next time for another edition of Connecting with Kim here on Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network and Sun Radio 96.3 FM. And so long, farewell.